My name is Oleg. My mission almost complete. Now I'll give a word to Vladislav Haraskevich. He will moderate this press conference. Thank you thank you everybody for joining us. And please, Vlad, your turn.
Yeah. Hello everyone, and first of all, a big thank you, and it's really a big pleasure to see you all here. And I just have some welcome words. And first of all, we are here, all of us, just because we care about Olympic movement, and we care about future of sport. And that's the reason why we're not hiding behind some private calls or close meetings, and we're able to speak here with you on public. We are not agree with latest IOC statements, and we have something to say. For that reason, we invite two great experts, and they will say their legal opinion on, first of all, on special reporters from United Nations opinion, and overall on IOC situation for now. So I'm giving stage to Mark Ort and Dr. Patricia. Yeah, please enter the stage.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
My colleague, Mr. Ort, if I may start with the human rights perspective on the issue of readmission. So first of all, to introduce you, I am a professor for human rights law and public international law at the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg. I'm a member of the Human Rights Committee of the German Olympic Sports Confederation. In this function, I was asked, and in my function as a law expert, I was asked by the German Olympic Sports Confederation to write a legal opinion on the question of the readmission, which I did, and which was introduced into the debate with the IOC. I would like to give you some insights in my perspective on the human rights dimension of the readmission. And for this reason, I have to start with some details about human rights law, because these details are relevant for our questions. So what is the standard of review we have to bear in mind when we discuss the readmission question? All human rights committee and courts hold that an unequal treatment on the basis of nationality only constitutes an inadmissible discrimination if it cannot be justified on legitimate grounds. Yesterday, and then quoting the special rapporteur in the field of cultural rights, Alexandra Xantaki, IOC President Bach stated that direct racial discrimination is a peremptory norm of international law. This statement suggests that international law makes the readmission of Russian and Belarusian athletes mandatory because the unequal treatment based on nationality is an absolute wrong. From the perspective of human rights theory and practice, this is not correct. Indeed, the prohibition of racial discrimination is part of the body of what we call the higher rules of international law. However, this does not mean that this right not to be treated differently on the basis of nationality is absolute. So the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, which is competent to decide on the matters of racial discrimination, said in General Recommendation 30 that there can be objective and reasonable justification for the different treatment. And in the case of AH and others versus Russia, which was decided by the European Court of Human Rights in 2017, Russia itself had tried to justify a national law on adoption, which excluded US American citizens because of their nationality, by referring to objective and reasonable grounds of this unequal treatment. So this is the standard of review we have to deal with, and which is relevant for the question of readmission. This means that this question has to be framed by two central questions. The first is, what are the legitimate aims for an exclusion of Russian and Belarusian athletes from international competitions? And the second question is, can these aims be achieved with less restrictive means than a total ban? This means that we have to check in detail if the conditions proposed by the IOC for readmission are equally suitable to achieve these aims as the complete exclusion of Russian and Belarusian athletes. And for me, there are two essential legitimate aims. The first is the protection of human rights of Ukrainians, which was unfortunately not mentioned by the IOC or by the Special Rapporteur. And the second legitimate aim is the promotion of peace. So when we talk about human rights of Ukrainian athletes in the framework of sporting competitions, we can think of the human right to mental health, the protection of their dignity, and their own right to have an undisturbed participation in sports as an expression of their cultural life and their right to work. On the other hand, the peace contribution part of excluding Russian and Belarusian athletes is very important. So on the one hand, sporting federations and the IOC have to be politically neutral. On the other hand, this political neutrality is framed by an overall Olympic postulate of peace that guides international sports. This means that the IOC and federations have the task and duty within the framework of their competences to contribute to the promotion of peace. And with the current ban, they make an important peace contribution by preventing that international sporting events and the athletes are abused for the purpose of Russian war propaganda. So this is the framework we have to deal with when we look at the proposed conditions. Shall I continue, or is this a first impression of what the real and the right human rights standard of review is like we have to deal with?
I think if we'll have questions, we can also ask them on a question answers parts, and if it will be not a problem, but mainly we understand that it's a pretty different point of view.
Yeah, so I think
so
to
now,
sum up the difference is it is not a yes or no question. The question is, are the proposed conditions enough to guarantee that the human rights of Ukrainian athletes are respected? And are they proportionate? This is the relevant question. Are they adequate to prevent that sporting events are abused for war propaganda? And this was unfortunately not addressed in the yesterday's statement of the IOC and not addressed by the Special Rapporteur, but it's very important when we look at the question of readmission.
Okay, thank you. So now opinion of Mark Orts, more about competition part, because in our perspective, it's not really right to talk about competition, about sport with somebody who really don't understand what is sport about and who will not follow our Olympic movement at all. So now we're giving stage to Mark Ort.
Thank you very much, Vladi, and thank you very much, Professor Dr. Viata, who really impressively showed that human rights is not a shield for the action currently taken by the IOC. I mean, Dr. Thomas Bach is trying to hide behind his understanding of human rights law, and Professor Viata made quite clear that there is also another opinion on what human rights law is and what the obligation and duties which arise out of that to that specific question. And I'm very thankful for that, Professor Dr. Viata. My opinion is a totally other different field of law, which is competition law. And I know from the past experience that you as athletes, you can challenge the IOC and their behavior based on competition law arguments. And that's what we did in 2017. We challenged on behalf of 2 German athletes, the position of IOC on what they call the Rule 40, which prohibits advertising for the athletes during the games. And in that procedure, it became clear that the IOC is dominant on the market for organizing and commercializing the Olympic Games. And out of that dominant position, it's a duty and an obligation which arises out of that dominant position. And that's not just German law, that's European law, that's US law. And nearly every country of the world currently has such a competition law. And I think you can argue on behalf of the athletes, you have a right against the IOC that they follow their own objectives, which is, and Professor Dr. Viata made that quite clear, promotion of peace. They bound themselves in that charter to the promotion of peace, and therefore they're obliged to follow that goal. And you can oblige them via competition law, what we call abuse of a dominant position, to make them follow that goal. And the measures and position taken by them, just to say, we will allow neutral athletes as long as they do not say something supporting the Russian forces or the Russian military actions in Ukraine. As long as they don't do something like that, they will be allowed to the games. In my understanding, that's not enough with regard to two objectives, which is protection of athletes. And I'm talking not about protection of only Russian athletes, but of Ukrainian athletes and other athletes, to have a peaceful and secure situation at the Olympic Games. And further on also, you have to bear in mind that any athlete is obliged by the Charter Rule 50 to abstain from political statements. And we currently have the situation that the president of the Russian IOC made quite clear what he regards or where he sees the connection between Russian athletes and Russian military actions and the position of the Russian state. And as long as he, as the president, states such an opinion, all his members are under that obligation opinion, and therefore every action of a Russian athlete is in support of the Russian state activities and also in support of Russian military forces. And I mean, IOC knows that, and they have to step in. And in my understanding, the only measure to guarantee that there is no connection between Russian athletes and the Russian military forces and their objectives in the Ukraine is not to give them the right to participate, because the Russian NSC made clear that there is a connection between sporting activities and state activities, especially of the military forces. So it's not enough just to say they can act or participate as neutral athletes as long as they do not say something to support the military forces or the military actions in the Ukraine. They already state something like that with their president's statement in support of the Russian forces. So the means is competition law, and especially its abuse of a dominant position. And the point I'm trying to make is that we have some experience in that, and that there is some history, and you really can challenge the IOC behavior based on competition law. And even if you look back to the when President Nixon had the discussion on the 1980 Olympic Games in Moscow, they already used the measure of the US competition law, which is called the Sherman Act, in order to put some pressure on the IOC. And just want to remind you a statement given by that time of the Bavarian Prime Minister to President Nixon, who met President Nixon just weeks before President Nixon talked to his athletes, to US athletes. And the point is that the Bavarian Prime Minister at the time, Franz Josef Strauß, he said that if you remind history, and in 1936, when the Olympic Games were organized in Germany, the Bavarian Prime Minister later said that history might have taken a different path if the games would have been taken away from Germany in 1936. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Now I want to talk about another topic. I see talk about some athletes who really against war, who really like acting for a peace, and who is not responsible for this war. In my perspective, it's important to hear them. And one of these athletes is Stepan Popov. He is from Belarus, and he is a refugee. He is now in Europe. And now I'm giving the floor to the athlete from Belarus who left his country because of opposition to Lukashenko's criminal regime. And now we will get information about how is real support of IOC to these athletes.
Hello to everybody. Thank you for invitations. My name is Stepan. I'm a world and European champions, but more famous for my fair play world diploma. And I first read the information for you. But latest decision was currently not the worst that could have been. It has become obvious to everyone that sport is a front where a serious struggle has started. Huge amounts of money and corruptions are involved. New this front is the very one where it is also important to win for all those who support Ukraine and independent democratic Belarus. The world once again felt the power of public opinion and international and state diplomacy, the power of the media and freedom of speech, as well as the power of millions of fans and the will and courage of athletes. Which speaking up against the war, the athletes have been carrying the new modern image of active and independent people who not outside the politics but for peace. All stated subjects of sport are the source of true sustainable values. Now we need to do a huge and routine work so that the effective admissions criteria have been implemented worldwide. From the one side, the criteria could become an opportunity for athletes of true values. From the other side, the criteria will be an impossible barrier for athletes, propagandists, and opportunities, those who support war even by their silence. The most of everything we can do ensure that the admission of athletes in any of its forms does not create the illusion of normalization of war. This is a historical challenge. The scale of repressions, which in Belarus have been living for 3 years, Russia has not even seen yet. If you don't support the state, you are already an enemy. You have to give interest views to state channels where you compliment the president and the country for the development of sport. Otherwise, you may be deprived of your career or go to jail. All sports are controlled by people in uniform or people close to Lukashenko. There are athletes who are propagandists. All these criteria, the illusion that athletes support Lukashenko. That is why any sport success will be seen as a credit to the regime and of Lukashenko himself. Belarusian sport is absolutely different from Russian sport. It is split into 3 camps. The first one is the most powerful opposition cooperating in the international field. The second one is the athletes propagandist supporting Lukashenko. And the third is very watchers. In 2020, several thousand athletes openly opposed the regime and created their own movements. These movements had a lot of support from the people and was a great surprise for the regime, caused fear and panic for it. The 3 athletes were declared almost the main enemy. Hundreds were fired, deprived of the opportunity to continue their careers. Hundreds left the country, having gone through detentions and arrests. Dozens of cases were opened for extremism. Courts were held in absentia with sentences up to 10-12 years in prison. 30 people from sports were officially recognized as political prisoners. Nothing like this can be seen in Russia. People, civic initiatives, Ukrainians, Polish, Lithuanians help us, but not the IOC or International Sport Organization give us a hand. Since the beginning of the war against Ukraine, some of our volunteers joined the rank of the ZSU, but we still continue our fight. Now we are solving the issue of legitimate representations of our interests, the interest of the present and future of Belarusian independent sport. We have a lot of things for that. We have been through a lot and we have exceptional experience. We also have the support of our friends and partners in the Ukraine, Poland, and Lithuania. This cooperation is official and we have to do our best to make it in institutional force, able to influence the international sport agenda. We are convinced that it is the beginning of a tectonic change in the sport system. Before our eyes through its heroism, Ukraine has made the world see the problems of the out-of-date system of international security. The same thing is happening in sport. For too long, the world has turned a blind-eyed and allowed things to happen that have had heroic consequences. Живе Беларусь и слава Украине!
Thank you, Stepan, for your statement, and it's pretty strong. So for us, its first question is what really changed over the last year? Why IOC decided to raise the issue of return of the Russian and Belarusian athletes on international sport arena. In IOC statements, they say that it's due to appeal of United Nations Special Rapporteurs, and as we see already, another opinion is also exist. But from the information over the last weekend, what we get from our Twitter account through the response of Kislitsa, its representative from Ukraine in the United Nations, we see that people who is called special rapporteurs, they're independent mandate holder. So it's their personal independent opinion. It's not opinion of United Nations. So why do we listen to people who are not really expert in sports? We have also some experience, and we have some evidence that they not really understand what's going on in the Olympic movement. And people who claim that Russian soldiers who gladly and willingly go to the war are not guilty. So why we listen them? Also, Bach's statement stated that yesterday stated that we took as a basic also Olympic summit, which was held at summer. So let me remind you, summit was visited by China, USA, and maybe you think it would be logically to see Ukraine here, but no, it was Russia. It was Russia and it was Pozdnyakov. Now we see the requirements from IOC, but Pozdnyakov, he is clear propagandist of Russian narratives. He stated that it's a big honor for Russian athletes to take part in special military operation. And also at the same time, he's a colonel of Russian army. So why we take into account his opinion? Why is it opinion is so important for IOC? But even this opinion is not the latest, not the last, it's not the end. Also, several Russian representatives, they still exist in, and they still in the board of several IOC commissions. And it's Isenbaeva, Trapyshev, Popov, and others. And they have personal sanctions from Ukraine for 50 years. And they also, Isenbaeva is also part of IOC Athletes Commission. So it's really not right to take their opinion into account. And why they don't take our opinion into account as they took another opinions. So about latest IOC, our conference, which was held in Friday, and United Special Reporter was there, Xantaki. I want to take and I want to give this stage to Johanna, great athlete and great human being, and yeah, just tell, want to hear like her experience because she was on this meeting.
Hello, hi, I'm Johanna Talihar. I'm a biathlete, three-time Olympian from Estonia. I was at the very meeting that the UN Special Rapporteur also tweeted about. I responded to her and the whole call by telling everyone how Estonian Athletes Committee is feeling about including Russian and Belarusian athletes. And our statement was that we do not think that this is the right time to include Belarusians and Russians back to the competitions. And I was the only speaker at that call whom Ms. Xantaki interrupted and used her whataboutism arguments against me. When I was briefly able to respond to her with my short response, I was being told that this is the time that we need to move on now. So I think a lot of athletes felt like I was being cut off. I got a lot of feedback from other athletes on that call. And since then, I have gotten some apologies from the IOC athletes representatives who were managing the call. But I think it was a very powerful moment in this call where we all could start getting a feel for Ms. Xantaki and her unwillingness to accept other opinions and her extremely disrespectful communication style, which was very evident also on Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you. So as we see, if a decision was made by meetings like that, for me, it's if there's like it's a whole reason for discussing to return of the Russian and Belarusian athletes, then I consider that this discussion baseless. Bach says that participation in sport works despite war in some different sports, and yes, of course, it works actively for Russian propaganda. And Bach mentioned tennis match of a Ukrainian player, and now it will be interesting to hear opinion of this Ukrainian player about Russians in her sports and how it getting used and get used in propaganda. Please, Marta, you can join us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marta. I'm a professional tennis player from Ukraine. A lot has been said, and I want to say from myself that we haven't been doing it publicly, but for the last year, we've been fighting to exclude Russian and Belarusian from our sport. And unfortunately, we are not independent players, and we are basically we are working for WTA and ATP organizations, and we didn't have a lot of power to make a change. We did everything we had in our power, and we were not doing it publicly, so not a lot of people knew about it. But a couple weeks ago, a lot of things revealed, and we got a lot of support online, and we see some improvements somewhere a little bit, but as of my match against a Russian player that was mentioned in Bach's press conference yesterday or 2 days ago, we have a ranking system in our sport, and if I will not participate against Russian and Belarusian players, I'm going to lose my ranking, and basically my career will be over. We spoke to our organizations about this matter, that we will not participate in the tournaments with them, because this is our recommendation from our federations, as of all the sports have agreed to. And their response to this was that we will freeze your ranking, and then once the war is over, you can come back to the competition. So this is something that is ridiculous to hear, and we've been feeling extremely discriminated this whole year by the different organizations, including WTA, ATP, ITF, and so on. And it's well, first of all, I think it's a complete not all the basic fair play rules are being rejected. They are not being followed, and this is what we see in our sport specifically. And yeah, I mean, we haven't gotten much support, but we are trying, and we keep on playing, because this is what we have to do in order to keep our careers alive and to fight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marta. And of course, it's important to mention that we also have good example of how they use these tournaments in propaganda. We saw this Z crowds in Australian Open tournaments. And of course, it's not what we want to see in the international sport arena, especially in Olympic sports, if you talk about some peaceful movement or Olympic values. So also, Bach named some other sports. And for this point of view, I will be glad to invite Dominik Hasek and hear his opinion on this topic about Russians in other sports, in non-Olympian sports.
Okay. Well, can you hear me, please? Hello?
Yes, everything works good.
Okay, guys, okay. First of all, I'm walking with my son outside and with my dog, so I'm moving. So you can hear me one more time, I'm asking everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for being part of you at today's press conference. Let me introduce myself. I used to play hockey. I was Olympian in a few times, and we won the gold medal in 1998 in Nagano, and been bronze in Torino 2006. And I try to be vocal about what's going on, since beginning of the war. I'm glad to be part of this group of people, athletes, and thank you to the two lawyers. I'm bad with names. I don't remember the names, but the woman and man who explained to us that what Bach told us, his explanation was wrong. So it's very important. On the other hand, I say I did not understand everything. We need to get this message short, written, in 10 sentences, so we can better explain to other people. And I want to encourage all of you guys that we need to be vocal. I was listening to I think Marta, her name is, from Ukraine, the tennis player, and I understand. I think I can understand how difficult it could be at ATP, or I'm sorry, at WTA, but we need to be vocal and we need to be supportive to each other. And I would like to get connection to all of you guys so we can share our feelings. We can support of each other on social media, and also to the girl, the woman from Estonia was talking about the woman from United Nations. It's terrible to hear that. She was so bad to you, and this is something we need to know, and we need to talk about it and support each other. So we'll see how it goes, but definitely we need to support each other, be vocal, and like I say, it's only beginning. We didn't lose. The battle, or what we heard from Mr. Bach yesterday, it was expected. It will be long. It will be the long war, and we will win. But we have to work together, and we need to support each other. So that's all from myself, and good luck to all of you guys. Want to stay in touch with you, and send me the address of your social media. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Dominic.
Yeah.
So Russian propaganda use good result in sport arenas as a good symbol before their political wins. It was stated on some propaganda TV. So they use sport to further brainwash, and there be encourage more and more people into participation into the war, like in the war, and full-scale invasion in our country, and to make genocide of Ukrainians. If athletes who willingly and gladly killing Ukrainians, or those who is being used in propaganda and responsible for war, wouldn't face strict punishment, then our mission, like as a peace in the world, is just empty words. Then Olympics is only about greed to money, it's just about business and to increase image to some countries who have a big problems. It was some statements about building bridges, that sport should build bridges. And we tried to build bridges 8 years. But as you see, Russian propaganda using us as one of their propaganda tools. And after 8 years of our attempts, full invasion, biggest war since World War II starts in Ukraine. And terrible that the war originally starts in 2014 when Russia hosted the Olympic Games. Our territories were occupied, and it was clear that back then Olympic Games helped increase Russia's image on a very high level. And it is absolutely wrong to deny that sport was outside of politics then, and it's also wrong to deny it now. And despite this, we gave peace a chance, and we tried to build bridges. But unfortunately, only one side wanted peace. The Russian and Belarusian regimes only wanted war. You can see how many Russian athletes from different sports actively support this illegal war, and how many athletes silent. If you are natural in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of oppressor. It was told by Nobel Prize winner Desmond Tutu, who was anti-apartheid and human rights activist. If athletes really not agree with position of their government, for them shouldn't be a problem renounce citizenship and compete for refugee team. I think refugee team is pretty good solution. With this and other requirements, should be added it will be answer for many unanswered questions. And we can talk about some kind of peace movement. About pressure families, yeah. So Bach also stated a lot about families who was pressured by the government, or like then the situation is looks like a group of people in Russia who acting for a peace have less rights than others. It reminds me of apartheid. Of course, then people were separated by color of skin, but overall problem is the same. Human rights are not respected. And what decision was made by IOC in relation to South Africa? Suspension for 32 years from the Olympic movement. How much did the Olympic movement of South Africa suffer during the suspension? How much the development of sport stopped? Why then was discrimination? Why wasn't back then wasn't discrimination for African athletes, but now they see discrimination in suspension of Russian athletes because of some United Nations opinion, but it's not also like IOC is independent structure and they should make their own decisions and they should take responsibility for their own decisions. So I would say in this case, IOC have hypocritical double standards. But responsibility by IOC was put on international federations in terms of suspension of Russian and Belarusian athletes. So at the end of the day, they will be responsible for decisions, each international federation for each decision. And as we see, some federations follow Olympic Charter and common sense, and they are making strong decisions. And now you can hear opinion of athlete from World Athletics, Yaroslava Moguchik, and we can hear her opinion.
Hello, thank you for inviting. Thank you for, I'm Yaroslava Moguchik, bronze medalist of Olympic Games in Tokyo. And this year was so difficult for all us. But World Athletics and European Athletics, they did all solidarity with Ukraine because they know how it's hard now to be here because we don't have time to be home because it's so difficult. And the athletes of Russian and Belarusian teams continue supported this war, and they competing. They don't spoken out against the war publicity really. And I had situation with Maria Lisitskeni when we hugged with them and with her. And after this Russian propaganda, they did, we one nation, we one nation, and we should go in one step together. But I'm only congrats Maria. It was not like with the same nation, and I'm agree that I will go with Russia, And Russia said, and after this, Russia said in all propaganda channels, Russia said that we one nation, and it was so bad, really. And now the athletes not spoken out about the war, and for me it's terrible.
Yeah, thank you for your words, and thank you for your speech. And as you see, they're using sport in their propaganda narratives, and just to increase propaganda influence all around the world. And at the same time, it was example of that we try to show respect. Yes, so Yaroslava just tried to show respect to athlete as a out of politics. But as you see, is no out of politics in Russia case. So it was hardly used in propaganda, and that's another evidence that they have no place in international sport arena. Now I want to talk about another federation. So we have not only World Athletics who suspend strongly strict decision, and they really appreciate Olympic Charter. We have another federations, and now its example is Fencing Federation. And I want to give word to Leah, because athletes in fencing, they're not standing aside. They also make strong decisions, strong statements. And I'm giving stage to Leah, and she will tell you more about it.
Yeah, thanks. So Thank you, Vladi. Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Lea Krüger. I'm fencer from Germany, and yes, the International Fencing Federation took a couple of weeks ago the decision that the Russians can come back in fencing, and it's allowed to come back in April, I guess, and April is also the start of Olympic qualification. So yeah, I know that here are also other fencers, but yeah, I think for all of us it was just a mess in the first place, because then of course there were the questions, okay, how they can come back. Nothing is clear. We don't know about Olympic qualification should work now, and nothing was clear. So many open questions also about, okay, what about doping? What about how to act? And that's a part I would also give a stage later, maybe to Olga or to the other fencers, how an Ukrainian athlete can compete against a Russian. I mean, you have to think also we have weapons in our hands. It's a real picture. It's a real situation then. And so a lot of questions weren't clear. And so we decided, okay, that wasn't our decision, because, and that's already mentioned a lot of times here, that the federations take decisions about us, about the athletes, and we have to deal with the consequences. And the Fencing Federation took the decision to let the Russians come back. And with this decision, they put the interests of Russia and Belarus in the first place above the interests of the athletes, especially of the Ukrainian ones. And so we decided, okay, we do not agree. We also put a sticker on one competition to show this, but we had the feeling, okay, maybe that's not enough. We have to make a sign. We have to show also the word that not all fencers do agree with this. And so we started a big letter. We wrote a letter together with Global Athletes and Athleten Deutschland from Germany. And it was over the weekend. We get more than 300 names on a list. And we published the letter yesterday morning, just before the decision of the IOC. And I think it was a good statement that we do not agree. And also in the letter, we ask the IOC and also the FIE, of course, to take back the decision, to take care about the interests of the Ukrainian athletes, especially also when you see the whole picture, what also Ms. Viata highlighted in the beginning, you have to weigh the interests. And that's also a point. We do not really see that here's a real weight of interests, because we heard that, Ms. Viata said that when you really have a real weight of interests, you can also say, okay, the interests from the Russian ones, or I have to turn it, the interests of the Ukrainian ones are more important. It's maybe not the right expression for, but they are over the interests of the Russian athletes. And so you can continue to ban them, because here we're talking about life and not only about competing. And even when we also take the restrictions now and the list what Bach gave us, we can, I don't know, I think we can still continue to say, okay, that's not enough, because all these interests we have to compare against each other, and also the sanctions that Bach gave us now, they are here to protect the athletes, to protect especially the Ukrainian athletes. And so, Ms. Viata said before, and in my opinion, or I think maybe then the Ukrainian athletes, especially them, has to have a stronger voice if these sanctions and restrictions are enough for them. That's I think that's a point we have to highlight in this place. Well, now I took the big picture and I started with fencing, and I had mentioned you my position now, but so that's what I can say on this point. Thank you.
Thank you. And also, let's hear a voice of fencing representative from Ukraine, Olga Harlan. So we are giving stage to you, and we will be glad to see your opinion.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hello, everyone. First of all, my name is Olga Karlan. I'm Olympic champion. First of all, I'm fencer. I'm Olympic champion. I'm 4 times Olympians, and I hope to be 5th-time Olympians as well. So talking about FIE, International Fencing Federation, decisions first. For me, it's like Ukrainian fencer, it's one of the Ukrainian fencer, it's really tough to manage it, like mentally, of course, right now it's even physically, because of course I was a part of this Congress where this decision was taken, and I took a stage as well, and for second time, because first Congress was in November 2022, and as we know, that time the decision was about, this decision was postponed on 10th of March, and for me it was kind of okay, maybe by that time IOC, the recommendation will be already out, but we haven't seen anything of that, but FIE still made this extraordinary Congress. And what can I say about this old Congress, that I haven't heard any word about solidarity with Ukrainian fencers or Ukrainian Federation, which was for me really hard to manage, like, because we heard about solidarity from IOC, and we felt it a lot during this tough year. And when I heard the first stage of current president of FIE, and from the second minutes of this Congress, he said that probably they will change places of competitions for Russian fencers to compete. So since then, I understood that probably they're taking part of Russian, right? Taking Russian side, because it's like, to think about this, like all the nations, like 40 countries who's participating in the competition, they have to change country because of one country. So for me, it was like something unbelievable. And of course, after decision, of course, we heard some rumors that they can be taken, but for me, it was impossible because war is still going, you know, and all the world know about this. And somehow they made the decision. For me, like Ukrainian first of all citizen, it's impossible to even to understand. Then, of course, we started to make this more public. I've made a lot of interviews also with some guys who's presented here, of course, and I would like to thank Leah for this initiative, and Global Athletic for this amazing support, and to all the 325 athletes, fencers who signed this letter. And it means that athletes' voice has to be heard, and it must be huge. So, I mean, this is probably the IOC decision also for me is like Ukrainian athletes. It's a lot of questions also to FIE, to IOC, how it's going to be, if FIE actually will change their decision, or they will change their, like, because of recommendation of IOC. I think it's a matter of time, but I know one thing, that we have to be we have to push more, we have to make it more public, and thanks to Vladislav, who like makes idea about this press conference today, we can make it public that much. About I would like to say about the stickers that Leah mentioned before, that we made this no, we don't agree. And recently in China, it was World Cup, and the fencers, it was happy woman, yeah. And they put these stickers on the mask, but probably we don't know how exactly it was and who was command. These stickers was taken away from the referees. So this is how it's going, you know. Yeah. So, but we had competitions in Belgium, we had competitions also in Budapest, and there was okay. In China, it was kind of strict because probably it wasn't that public yet at that time in Belgium and Budapest. So, but anyway, we have to push more. We have to push more, and thanks to everyone to make it public and for support. And I would like to say thanks to Johanna, who was amazing during this call against this conversation against Miss Ksentaki. And it was really powerful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Olga. And now we have also one more tennis player, and Lesya Tsurenko. Yeah, so also would be important to hear her opinion in terms of other sports and what they are dealing with. Yeah, so I'm giving stage to Lesya. You're welcome.
Can you hear me? Thanks a lot. My name is Lesya Tsurenko. I'm a professional tennis player from Ukraine. And first of all, I would like to say thanks to everyone for this meeting. It's so great to see the support from the other sportsmen from different countries. It's just an amazing feeling to see that we are not alone in this fight. I would like to clarify the situation in tennis, because Mr. Bach mentions tennis all the time in every speech. And as Marta said, we actually fighting against the participation of Russian and Belarusian tennis players in the competitions from the very beginning of war. Everything that Mr. Bach is saying is a clear manipulation. He doesn't want to say that there is a representative in the International Olympic Committee of tennis, main tennis, the president of Tennis Federation of Russia. He also gives an example of the match on Australian Open where the representative of Ukraine played against a Russian player. He doesn't want to say that it was a clear example of bad sportsmanship, of Z symbols on the stands, Russian flags, and even portraits of Putin during that match. All this year, we clearly see that WTA and ATP are actually protecting Russian and Belarusian players, and they completely forget about Ukrainians, about their rights, and about how they feel and in which conditions they should compete. We have an example of Anastasia Gasanova, who posted a video on her social media where she's saying everything that Russia propaganda is actually saying. So she clearly showing the support of the war in Ukraine, and I believe that she's not the only one. So we are facing the situation when we are surrounded by players who are potentially supporting the war, but no one really wants to talk about this. And we are tennis players, we are in trap. We have to compete just because our organizations is telling us to do that, no matter what. We also had an example when one of the Ukrainian players wanted to show her position with going on court with some kind of banner. After that, she's been told that she can't do it, and next day the player from Russia just pulled out. So they are doing everything to prevent any kind of actions from Ukrainians. And tomorrow we are going to have another meeting where we're going to raise this question again, and let's see what happens. thanks a lot. I would like to say thanks a lot to everyone for support and for this chance to talk. Thanks.
Big thank you, Lesa, and yeah, it was important, I think, for all of us who are sitting here. So let's like take some end of our speech, and we will start question answers parts. So now I see a lot of questions. We will answer it soon. So now I would say some points. So first of all, we want to, IOC first of all, take some responsibility and suspend officials who is a part of Russian propaganda, who is active part, and who is shouldn't make such a decisions in about future of Olympic movement. I'm talking about Esenbayeva, Popov, Trapishiev, others who is in commissions, and also about Pozdnyakov. He shouldn't make a difference on our future because he is a clear propagandist. He's in military, colonel Russian army, and for him is no place in international sport. So also protection from war propaganda, from war propaganda instrumentalization of international sports competitions by Russia and Belarus is guaranteed by completely exclusion. Everything else supports the Russian war. It's based on the laws of European Union. So it's end of the part of us, and we are ready to hear your questions. And yeah, so we're ready to start. Yep.
Vlad, maybe in the beginning we'll answer the questions which were made in the chat. For example, from Christoph Stom. I'm sorry if I made a mistake. Question to the athletes in this round regarding Markov's statement. Do you intend to take legal action against the IOC decision?
I would say we are not ready to make some big announcement, but for sure we will look on a possibility of that, and yeah, so stay tuned. And I think it's it's not the end. It's not the end of our everything what we do. It's just a first meeting, and it's just the beginning, and we're ready to work in direction of make the world better. So also was question about apartheid, but I think it's pretty clearly that we answered already in our statements. Also was question about yeah, so just for Dominic also can answer if he saw this question.
Dominic, are you here?
Yeah, let's then I will answer a question about Crimea. What we think about illegal visit of Crimea. As I think it's a very strong break of Ukrainian law, because it's border law, and Russia, many Russian athletes, we already have some evidence, photos, and some public information we collected already, and many athletes, they're doing training camps. Yeah, I will finish. So they're doing training camps in Crimea. And of course, we should show strong position against it, because it's illegal actions against our country, and of course they should be suspended for that.
Yep.
Okay, Dominic, are you here? Yeah. Here we have in chat a question for you. In your opinion, why do some of your colleagues not only see no problem with the admission of Russians and Belarusians, but also perhaps continue to be friends with athletes who support the government? For example, David Pasternak, who was photographed with the founder of Putin team at the NHL All-Star.
I know what you're talking about David Pasternak. I don't, he lives in Boston. He's part of the NHL, and NHL has their stand about playing Russian players. I'm criticizing every day the NHL about letting Russian players play, because I believe it's advertising of the war. But I have to tell about David. I don't think, because he lives in Boston, he's focused on hockey, and about his photo with Ovechkin, I don't think he was thinking about the war. He put him, unfortunately, there just because he admires him as a player, and he was criticized from the Czech Republic, and he took this photo out of his Instagram within a few hours. So I was disappointed with David, without any doubt. However, I stand behind him, and I believe he's not war supporter. Anyway, I'm big criticized person of the NHL because they let Russian players play, and I believe it's like give a free war to Russian propaganda, and it helps Putin's war or Russian war. So this is my position on participating Russian players in the NHL and also in other sports. It's the same way in tennis and WTA and ATP. It's exactly the same, and unfortunately, this is their stand. But I was so glad to hear from Ukrainian tennis players today, and they explained their position. And we just need to be more vocal. We cannot be afraid. These girls, they need our support. And I believe one day NHL and WTA and ATP and other sports federation will pay to Ukraine billions of dollars. You know, I know it will be complicated, but I really believe that. Okay. That's my answer.
Thank you, Dominic. And we have one more question to all Ukrainian athletes. What is your position regarding potential boycott of Olympics in Paris if IOC let Russia and Belarus participate?
Yeah, I will start. So like regarding to what I say, like all last 8 years we're building bridges and it led to full invasion. So I'm really afraid if we continue to compete with Russian athletes, where we will be in the future. So maybe it will be lead to World War III. You never know, especially with the Russian. About boycott, of course, it's not our goal. Boycott is not our goal, and it's important to understand that we want to be part of Olympic movement. We want to be part of peaceful and promote peace all around the world. But we have a problem. It's Russia who now bombing our cities and doing genocide in Ukrainian land. And it's not, we can't imagine in some kind of sports, and I think Olga also will tell it a little bit later, to be on a stage with the Russians or like the Russian players who responsible for this war. It's not right time to talk about it, and it's not yeah. So as we stated today, also if boycott, if you will do it all alone, if you don't have big coalition, absolutely, of course, it makes no sense because just Ukrainian side again suffer. So we suffer on the front lines, we suffer in our country, and we suffer on sport arenas because we will be sanctioned. I can't say like another word because we just suspend ourselves. So of course it's not a solution, and I would concentrate now more on suspension of Russian and Belarusian athletes, not about boycott of Ukraine.
Maybe someone will want to add words of Vladislav, someone of sportsmen. Olga, are you here? Olga Harlan.
Yes, I'm here. I have some, I see some questions to me, right?
Yeah. And at the same time, it would be okay if you answer the question regarding boycott, potential boycott if Russians and Belarusians will be at the Olympics. What do you think about it?
Yeah, it's yes, it's really tough question, and because for all of us, like of course, each athlete's Olympic Games are like for someone it's first one, for someone it's last one, or even second one. I don't know. It's to think that we will not go because of they will go there. It's something unbelievable because. I think we deserve to go to Olympics in any way. This is only my opinion, but this one, and another hand, we have to do everything that Russians, Belarusians will not go because of their propaganda and their actions, you know. And so for me as an athlete, of course, I would like to go to Olympics. As a Ukrainian citizen, it's tough to even imagine how to stand like next to them, to know that they're supporting or they're in silence, you know, and we haven't heard any like word from them, or we know that they represent army that shelling Ukraine every day, you know, like still we have to figure out with the federations, with NOC and with the government, I guess, of course, with the government, how to act, and you know, we have some time to think about this.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question. Can someone comment on the views of the Ukrainian combat sports athletes Klitschko, Alexander Usyk, and Jan Belenuk? It clearly said that Russia should be banned from international sport. Thanks. Vlad, we know the position of Vladimir Klitschko, Alexander Usyk, and Jan Belenuk. I think,
yeah, but I would say it's pretty
everything.
clear. Yeah, it's pretty clear, and yeah. So of course, I don't want to talk from their names because yeah, I'm not doing it. So it's their names, and it's better to ask them. But I'm sure that of course they also yeah, have pretty similar position as we.
One more question for Ukrainian athletes. Can you elaborate on the mental, emotional toll that this decision might have? How does it impact training, daily life, and goals? Can you share any examples of specific interactions you have had with pro-war Russian athletes that have left a negative mark?
I can start. So like at example, in our case, we have some comments in social media, we have some messages in social media, some Russian athletes, junior athletes, so more than 80 years old, because in our sport, 18 years old, but in our sport, it's still 23. So they write and they wishing bomb in our house, some athletes just write some Russian narratives in comments, and many others just support the war. So it's what we see from them. And of course, for us, it's pretty disappointed because we also, in some point, we believe that they're not guilty. And we also want to believe it, yes, they're like just victims, and but they're not. So like literally from when full invasion starts, we see that they're fully support this war, or they're taking part in some propaganda work. So if we, of course, if we talk about some civilian Russian people, it's possible to understand that they never was in other countries, and of course they just watching one channel and they like in a box, yeah, so they're thinking just about Russian propaganda. But Russian athletes, on the other hand, it's a little bit different because it's people who travel around the world and who see and who know us Ukrainians as an athletes. They was, I think, all around the world in any countries. They see that it's not NATO army all around, it's not Nazis in Ukraine, that we want to live normal life, and we do it normally in our normal life when we don't have war. So I would say it's a big disappointment for us, and for me especially, it was a very big shock when I see that they keep silent or even support war or taking part in some events, as it was, at example, Young Army Club in kids camp Artek in Crimea. It's just throwing down all of our efforts to make world better as an athletes. And now in Russia, they have idols who literally murders and who doing some like such a big propaganda of war. And it's not future what we want.
I know that Lesia has a story of interaction with Russian athletes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lesia, sorry.
Yeah, I should probably tell a few stories, but the one that I mentioned already, the story with Anastasia Gasanova, who posted a quite clear statement of why Russia should invade Ukraine. She said a lot of lies, the clear propaganda. Everything that we see on Russia propaganda TV, she just repeats, and it happened after the explosion on the Crimea bridge, and it was maybe like a trigger point for her, so she started to talk. But I know for sure, and she only got warning from WTA. We've been told from the beginning of the war that if they show something like this, they will be banned. But at the end, it was only warning. We also know that from the beginning of war, a few players showed their pro-war position on tour. So they were spreading information on tour, talking to coaches, to players, and to say that it's the right thing to do, is geopolitics, Russia is the best, is the strongest country in the world, and so on. Of course, my reaction, my mental reaction was terrible. Like when I saw Gasanova, like what should I do in this case? I know that this person supports the war, and I don't know what should I do. Should I start fighting or arguing? I don't know. It's like again, no one thinks about Ukrainians' mentality and about how Ukrainians feel. Also, the example of Wimbledon, when they took away all of the points, it actually affected a lot of players who dropped in the ranking from being 70 in the world to 150. And it's not just Ukrainians, it's about discrimination of players from different countries. Also, we have the example when it was a tournament in Estonia where the tournament was held without Russian and Belarusians in this tournament. And it was great. It was the opportunity for Ukrainians to play a tournament with a better feeling, you know. And this year, this tournament not in place anymore. Just because WTA put so much pressure on that tournament, so they could not hold it again. And at the same time, we see the example when Djokovic is not playing tournaments in United States. The points are still there. So we see that they, and also another thing, when you go for press conference, the questions about war are blocked. So if a Russian or Belarusian player doesn't want to answer questions of they are not comfortable to answer questions about war, they would not, because this question would not be allowed during this press conference. And the last example that I want to show is that my situation with the CEO of WTA, Steve Simon, who in a private conversation clearly showed me his position, and probably, I don't know, the position of the whole organization, that supporting the war is okay. Then I have a question, what else is okay? Why no one is thinking about the discrimination of Ukrainians? We only hear about discrimination of Russians and Belarusians. What about Ukrainians? What else is okay in this world? I think this message should be like it should be a global message for everyone, that all these things should be stopped. I hear so many stories when sportsmen, when journalists in Belarus and Russia are going to jail just because they are showing their position. And I think all these terrible things in the world should be stopped. And we have a chance to show this through sport, but we cannot, because there are people who just supporting, in my opinion, very bad, unfair, and just terrible things.
Thank you.
And also, yeah, I'm sorry, someone is telling me Sabalenka in chat. I mean, now they are trying to show that they are the victims in tennis, that they feel hate and aggression from us. That's so strange to hear. I mean, Ukrainian players are not spreading hate or aggression. why they say this, I don't know. I think it's another game that they are starting right now, that they are the victims, not us.
I see. Oh, thank you, Lisa. I see Olga Harlam wants to add something. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I need to run away because I have a work in with executive committee of NOC. But I have some questions to answer. I see that someone asked me how disappointed was I. Nobody shown support from Russian athletes. You know, probably in the first weeks of the war in February, we all we shut and we were screaming about support, about like go to the streets, you know, say something, you know, like make it stop. We called for help, let's say, through social media, but no one. I can say no one, just one person from Russian athletes, fencers, wrote me exactly 24th of February with his or her support. So it's, until today, I never heard like anything from them, and I'm not sure that I'm waiting for that because there's no sense, and they showed their attitude and their you know, position. So I wouldn't like to have something in common with people who support war or can't say anything or find the excuses why they can't say anything. Then it's about weapons because we are fencers, and if I will fence again against Russian neutrality Russian athletes, you know, we all professionals, and if I will fence, which is can be or not cannot, I think I will be professional, and of course I don't want to be in jail. How is it funny to see? But of course we are professionals, and believe me, I'm thinking about to win competitions, to win Olympic Games or something, and no matter who against me, and of course I don't want to kill them. If one more question that I want to answer, it's if I will start the qualification. The thing is, Russian athletes will come back exactly when Olympic qualification will start. So right now it's you all know the position of Ukrainian Federation that we will not go, since IOC decision and the recommendation right now is out. So we will speak to our national federation, and we will decide what to do and how to act, or we will go to competitions or not. Of course, it's about NOC and everything. So it's like a collective work and collective decision. Thank you guys to everyone that joined today, and I was happy to see everyone and to listen the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. Have a nice day. Mr. Roth, maybe you next. You raised your hand.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would just like to mention two more legal points. When it comes to the specific recommendation given yesterday by the IOC. And the point is, I want to show that it's not workable. It wouldn't work in practice. Just for example, I mean, they say that in general, single athlete, not team athletes, are not excluded from the games as long as they doesn't show some support for, let's say, military activities, Russian military activities in the Ukraine. And why it's not workable, the point is that, for example, they're excluded if they are or have been contracted by military or national security services of Russia and Belarusian. And I mean, who can prove that? Just two persons can prove that. It's Russia as one party to the contract, and the other party is the other party to the contract with which is the athlete. And if those two remain silent, and that's probably what they will do, you or no one else can prove that they have contracted or still contract with national Russian or Belarusian security forces or military forces. So it's just not workable to prove that for anybody else. So you or me, we cannot prove that. So it's not workable, doesn't work and the other point is that as long as the athletes do not show any position that they consent to Russian activity, they are regarded as neutral. And I mean, as I already mentioned, we all know the position given by the president of the Russian National Olympic Committee in support of the Russian forces, military forces there. And therefore, all athletes show the support with their president, the president of the NOC, being in support of the Russian forces. So I think one needs to change the proof of evidence. And may I just compare it to the situation we had with the Rule 40? IOC themselves, they are protecting their commercial interests. And anyone who is in danger of getting into that commercial activity of IOC by doing advertising themselves during the Olympic Games, it's prohibited, as easy as that. And it's prohibited as long as the IOC give its support to that specific action. So that's a different proof of evidence. And so when it's about protecting the commercial interests of the IOC, they are quite clear on a post analysis and not a pre-analysis. And when it's about you and anyone else and the Russian athletes, it's you who have to prove. So they amend the proof of evidence, and it's not in accordance with their own measures and benchmarks. That's the point I'm trying to make. And there is a second point, is I know you athletes all shows support of that activity, but I will tell you, it's very, very important that you keep on and that you speak with a loud voice. And I give you a specific example with Rule 40. Rule 40 was challenged not only before the German Competition Authority, but it was also challenged before the Austrian Competition Authority. And it was not really challenged, but in the Austrian case, the Austrian National Olympic Committee went to the Austrian Competition Authority. And in the end, the outcome of the procedure was that the interest of the National Olympic Committee was protected by the authority, because no athlete went to the Austrian Competition Authority and saying, I'm not fine with the way the regulation is handled. I'm not fine with the limits for my own advertising possibilities. And the authority just said, no athlete came to us and talked with us and discussed their problems. Therefore, we regarded silence as consent. And that's very important to stand up as you do by now and to speak up and to change the game. It's the athlete's game. And that is what, I mean, when you look at US sports, the influential party is the athletes federation. The athletes units, they are the powerful, the strong ones, and they can change something. And when you look to ice hockey in the Olympic Games, they changed something. So you have to speak up as you do by now, and it's very important that your voice is heard. And then, sorry, that's it.
Thank you.
As I see, Patricia wants to add, yeah, to this.
Yeah, just one other legal remark, because the Special Rapporteur Xantaki was mentioned, and I just wanted to make clear that the standard of review I presented to you is not my personal point of view, but it is the standard which is practiced by the UN Human Rights Committee, by the UN Committee on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, by the Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, by the European Court of Human Rights. So it's not me against the Special Rapporteur, but it is a pretty common and established standard of review that unequal treatment based on nationality can be outweighed and can be balanced and has to be balanced with competing interests. And this means that the human rights position of Ukrainians have to have a very strong position in this balancing process. So it's not about the human rights of Russian versus nothing, but it's about the protection of peace, restoration of peace, and the protection of human rights of Ukrainian versus interests of Russian and Belarusian athletes. I just wanted to clarify that this is not my personal point of view, but this is the common standard of human rights practice. And so there's when you talk to the international federations, please make that clear, that this is not the position presented yesterday by the IOC and by the Special Rapporteur is not the common standard of human rights practice, but it's, I would say, a minor position.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's finish with the questions in the chat. I see that we have a question, video question, and now please raise your hands to ask questions, and we'll give you an opportunity to ask it. Mr. Alexander Levinsky, please, your question.
Yes, hello everybody. I just would like to say first that very important that athletes today loudly declaring that IOC does not pay attention to the opinion of Ukrainian athletes, and on the contrary tries to pretend that Ukrainian athletes are not at all against competing with Russian and Belarusian athletes. And Mr. Bach tries to build so-called bridges. What Lea Kruger said about the initiative of German athletes is very important, and it is something that the IOC should pay attention to if there are many such opinions. From different countries, from different athletes, it's very important. When athletes from different countries will speak, it will force the IOC to react, because athletes are exactly what all sports are about. And if athletes from different countries will say, as Lea Kruger says, that the opinion of athletes from Ukraine, a country whose people are killed and commit genocide, should be heard, as they're ready to compete with representatives of those who kill them. There can be no bridges with those who kill and destroy. They must be isolated from peaceful struggles because they carry the war, not peace. It is very important that athletes from all over the world oppose this decision of the IOC. The more often they speak and the more athletes they are from all over the world, and it will be more strongly. So my question is to Lea Kruger. Do you feel that there may be any penalties if you, for example, refuse to participate in the competition if Russian or Belarusian athletes are admitted? What literally done, yes, by your international federation. So what do you think about this if, I could say, many athletes will deny to compete against them?
Yes, first of all, thank you for your words as well. And I wanted also to thank Ms. Viata, because she resumed again what I tried to mention before. And to answer your question, in the first place, at the moment, I would highlight two things. First of all, the international organizations, especially the IOC, didn't take the real responsibility at the moment to take decisions. And now we have the situation that our international federations can take their own decisions. And so we have, now the situation that nothing is clear, as I already mentioned before, because our federation said something, okay, the Russians can come back, but nobody knows how this can work. And also with the decision of the IOC from yesterday, we can see that, there are some recommendations, but it's not a real taking of responsibility. And so we, the athletes, we are all left alone because we have a messy situation. And before all these questions, how to deal with the situation and what consequences this has now for me, especially how, for example, as I already mentioned before, with the anti-doping, or also with the neutrality, and all these questions are not really clear, especially in the federations. And now I have the situation, you asked me, should I, maybe I'm getting a penalty, I don't know, a sanction, I don't know. And maybe I think all the international federations, they have the duty now to protect us, the athletes, to take responsibility for these situations, to make clear answers, and then we can also deal with. And I wanted also to say it before Olga left, because that's also a thing with the boycott situation. We do not know how the situation will be. And I think it's very early to talk about the boycott, because we should never be in the situation. We should never be in the situation to talk about a boycott, because that's just shows us that the international federations didn't took any responsibility in the past. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Magnus Gamlan, please.
Hi, Magnus from NRK in Norway. Back to some of what Mark was saying about the Russian athletes and their connection to the army. Is there a fear that the Russian government can simply say that the athletes are no longer connected to the army and so be one step closer to being eligible to compete in the Olympics? So do you see the process from the IOC as somewhat rigged, that it's rules that's easy to pass by? I guess the question can go to Vladislav or anyone else that feels like answering.
Hi, I'm Johanna. We discussed it earlier with the group, and we don't know yet. There have been no clarifications about those rules. They say that all the Russian athletes also have to meet all the anti-doping requirements. At the same time, RUSADA has not been accredited for a while, and foreign testers have not been able to access athletes in Russia. So there are a lot of details about these rules that we don't know yet. And that's one thing is yes, if Russian athlete was in the military yesterday, but can they compete tomorrow if they say I'm not in the military anymore from today? So we don't actually know, and these all need clarifications. But also it comes down to individual sports. So every sport has their own governing body, and the governing body makes the rules. So it can also happen that one sport interprets those rules one way and another sport in a different way, unless IOC makes a more exact clarification about those rules. Just some notes and some discussions that we have already had in the athlete community beforehand. Thank you.
Yeah, so I will add, because from the side of IOC looks like this requirement about military, it was added just before this conference, and that's, in my opinion, the reason why we don't have any good clarification, because it's pretty simple to add some time period or something like that, but we don't see it. Maybe it was because there was a lot of criticism through media on some insane statements of Mrs. Xantaki, but I think it's pretty clear that they not prepare this requirement.
Can I add about military? Because government have good influence and pressure for these sportsmen who are in military. Because when we have this problem in Belarus, these sportsmen who will be against the regime of Lukashenko, in 1 or 3 days, the Minister of Sport, they do these things that they go to the work and can't trainings. That's why all sportsmen from Russia and Belarus who are in military have good influence from his government, and they will be do everything that they tell them.
Okay, thank you. If you have any questions, please raise your hands and we'll give you an opportunity.
Yeah, I will start. It was some question about some specific rules for how we should act. Yeah, so in a international, and I will answer. So it was different with Yaroslava and Abramenko. So with Yaroslava, situation was pretty clear. Yeah, so just acting and show some respect to as an athlete, not as a so try to build in bridges. So we see result and we hear result from Yaroslava. Abramenko situation was different because it was already some requirements and we already have some instructions, but he was celebrating his medal and Russian athlete come from the back and just hugging him. It was a photo straight away, some journalists make photo, and Russian propaganda start to force it as a united with Ukraine, as a brotherhood nations, and all of that. So that's also one of examples that IOC can't prevent it, and athletes not in every situation can also prevent it. And also a big question. So which will be sanctions for athletes. Yeah, so it was told on a press conference yesterday that it will be some sanctions from IOC, but which exactly sanctions? And also, as we see, it was sanctions on officials from Russia, especially on Matsin, Ministry of Sport of Russia. But he was attend World Championship in IBA Boxing Federation, and he has some meetings with National Olympic Committee representative from India. So what punishment facing Olympic Committee of India or this exactly representatives? So as we see in a question where like IOC should take some responsibility, at example, about some members in commissions, then don't do it. So they put all responsibility to international federations now. And yeah, and we don't know what's going on in conversations with federations and IOC. So maybe they also put some pressure on them behind like in this close private calls and everything like that. So it's also interesting to know from the federations.
And we have a question to Marta, but I don't see her in our chat right now. But I think it's we can re-ask this question to other Ukrainian sportsmen. Question: what would you tell Bach, who highlighted your tennis match, it means Marta's tennis match yesterday, as an example that Russians can compete? Unfortunately, I don't see Marta. But I think that Lesa could be at the same situation.
Yes, of course. I could be at the same situation, and I actually win. So I supposed to play against Sabalenka in the last in the previous tournament, but the conversation with Steve Simon affected me very much. So, and you know, I was just thinking that, oh my God, Steve Simon is going to use my name in the negative way for me. So it's affecting us a lot in a negative way. Mentally, it's very tough to play, and especially to go and play on the big stadium when a lot of people would watch the match. And it affected me so much that I had like kind of panic attack. So for sure, it's a very bad thing that they are not banned from our sport. Unfortunately, we couldn't do anything because it seems like it's the politic of our organization. So yeah, I just want to say that it's a negative thing for us, and I honestly think for sport in general, and just it's an ethic conflict that we have every time we have to play against them.
Okay, thank you very much. Magnus, one more question, yeah?
It was written, yeah, but to Stepan. Yeah, so if you can answer it.
Yes, about Viktor Lukashenko, because we have a good fight with the regime. In 2020, we sent a lot of mails in IOC, and IOC makes this decision that Alexander Lukashenko lose his post in National Olympic Committee and put his son Viktor. But IOC don't признал his official president. Admit, yes. That's why Viktor Lukashenko is not legal president of IOC. And as I tell in my speech, all leaders of federations, ministers of sports, people in militaries or close to Lukashenko. That's why it's very hard.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question in chat. What do you think about the exclusion of Russians from team competitions by the decision of the IOC? In the same biathlon, individual competitions are absolutely not separate from teams. qualification for the World Cup is through the Team Cup of Nations. The lack of a clear statement will allow us to put pressure on the teams in various relays, such as athletics, fencing, for example.
Shall I?
Yeah. Maybe you will try to say, yeah, Leah.
Yes. So first of all, I think, yeah, it's it's good that because always a team is always representing really a country, and an individual, I don't know, but that's our questions we have to think about later, and we have to also getting one more some more answers from the IOC how this can work. And that's what I also, I think, mentioned before, just before. These are all open questions, and our federation, the FIE, has to show us now how the solution is for. I don't know how Olympic qualify can go like this. I have no response on this, and I'm waiting for an answer from my federation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. One more question to Patricia. Am I understand right? Alexandra Xantaki presented her personal opinion that is inconsistent with general interpretation and practice in human rights, but Thomas Bach still considered is as essential.
I'm not sure. I think she did not express her personal opinion, but she spoke in her function as the UN Special Rapporteur. So this was not, this is why I understood that Thomas Bach referred to her, because it was said in an official function. But we have to clarify one very important thing. She is the Special Rapporteur for Cultural Rights. There's another Special Rapporteur for discrimination issues. And as I said, there's a specific UN treaty committee interpreting the Convention of Racial Discrimination. So she's not the UN expert for discrimination issues on the one hand, and on the other hand, as I said, the position she presented, or the yardstick for justification or for the exclusion issue she presented, is not what is the common understanding in human rights practice. And interestingly, in the letter, the two UN Special Rapporteur sent to the IOC and last year, at the end of last year, there was a completely other yardstick and so test presented by the UN Special Rapporteurs, because there they mentioned that there are possible reasons to justify an unequal treatment based on nationality. So maybe you can reread this letter, which is also linked on the web pages of the IOC. There it was said, please give us reasons which might justify or explain this unequal treatment. What are the reasons? That was the initial position taken by these two UN rapporteurs. And for some reason, which I don't know, this changed into a kind of absolute prohibition of discrimination or of unequal treatment based on nationality, which is actually the way it was presented yesterday, not the standard as it is commonly defined by human rights practice. The standard we know and which is common is the one which was presented in the first letter of the two UN Special Rapporteurs last year, at the end of last year. Unfortunately, we never got into these details in the public debate. So no one clearly pointed out what are the legitimate reasons why Russian and Belarusian athletes are treated differently. Are there legitimate grounds? And I would say, yes, there are legitimate grounds. The war, the propaganda issue, human rights of Ukrainians. So there are several legitimate reasons to exclude them from a human rights perspective. And I clearly don't know why this was never debated. And I think the time is urgent to do so, also by the international federations, to really get into the details and say, okay, can these conditions for readmission fit these legitimate aims? Can we really reach the protection of Ukrainian human rights with these conditions proposed yesterday by the IOC, or are they not enough? And with regard to propaganda issues, I do have doubts that these conditions are enough to reach this legitimate aim, not to have international competitions abused for war propaganda purposes. So I think she said so in her official function, and Thomas Bach followed this position. This is what we have to state.
Okay.
Yeah.
But also, as we see latest, we read. I think every one of us, like, we read full position of Mrs. Ksentaki, also in public, so that soldiers are not guilty, even if they not committed like some genocide or war crimes, like and it was I don't want filmed or something like that. So looks like Thomas Bach also in this point of yesterday press conference, he took some part of advice of Mrs. Ksentaki. So it's why it was like main question in this topic, why we consider her opinion so essential, why her opinion is more essential than others.
Yes, I mean, the most essential and relevant positions are those adopted by the competent human rights committees and courts. These are the bodies interpreting with a binding force these conventions and human rights treaty where we find the prohibition of discriminations. These are the relevant sources we have to look at. And in my German legal opinion, I'm quoting these the relevant judgment or relevant judgments, and I'm dealing with, can we transfer this to our position or not, to our situation? And so right now, within the legal debate, there was no reference to the binding authority of the competent human rights committees. A UN special rapporteur does have a very important function in the UN system, but it's a very limited one, and they are not the authoritative sources for interpreting human rights treaties. These are, as I said, and as I quoted, this is the Committee for for the Interpretation of the Convention of Racial Discrimination, and they say there are grounds to justify an unequal treatment based on nationality. So these are the sources we should look at, and the Federation should look at.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we already here. And, I guess we can finish our press conference, and one information for everyone who asked me where you can find this video, this press conference. If you want it, please write me again in WhatsApp, and I'll give you in 3 or 4 hours links to the Google Disk or in the YouTube, and you can download it. Thank you very much. Vladislav, please,
yeah,
if you have something to add, please add.
Yeah, just first of all, again, thank you, huge thank you to join us, to join our conversation. Just important message for us also, keep supporting Ukraine, keep help our people who struggling from the war, from a legal war. Keep supporting organizations who help Ukraine, and stay strong, stand with Ukraine. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.